Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, I'm Forum, and I welcome you to our 16th external webinar. Thank you for giving us your love and support as always. We welcome you all to another episode of GPL Capital's webinar in association with Motilal Oswal AMC. Our speakers for today is Mr. Prateek Oswal. Pleasure to have you, sir. Mr. Prateek Oswal currently heads Motilal Oswal AMC passive funds business. Prior to this, he was heading the operations and finance at a Series A fintech startup in San Francisco. Apart from tech, Mr. Oswal has experience working in investment banking, PE, and hedge funds. He studied maths and economics at the Emory University and has MBA from the London Business School. Thank you for giving us your valuable time, sir. Our moderator, Mr. Imran Vora, VP Equity Research at GPL Capital. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field of Indian equities and is associated with GPL Capital for the past 13 years and holds a degree in MBA Finance and BIT. Thank you for joining us, Imran sir. We will first start with Mr. Oswal, followed by an interactive session with our speaker and moderator. As you all know, this is a live event on Facebook. Hope you all put up your best and like and share our Facebook page with your friends and family, and they will see your live there too. We are putting up the link for Facebook in our chat room over here. As you are aware, we have taken questions from you all on the email beforehand. We have received a lot of questions and we will try our best to accommodate those. If in case we've missed anything, you all can put in your questions in the chat room here. I now hand it over to Mr. Oswal.
Yeah, thank you for having me out here. Thank you, Forum. Thank you, GPL. And look forward to having a great session with all of you on the topic of international investing. You know, it's something which has been, I think, a topic of conversation over the last 3 to 6 months' time. So hopefully I'll be able to make a lot more sense. I'll also talk a little bit about the two funds that we have, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, which I think are extremely popular today. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions after that. So let me just share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna full screen mode. Oh, sorry, for some reason I can't share it on full screen mode. Okay, perfect. Great. So, so before I start, I wanted to give some background about my experience so far. So before heading passive funds at MOMC, I used to manage a lot of money for ultra HNI clients in the US. So before this, I was in San Francisco, where I was running a fintech company where we were managing money for ultra HNIs. And what we saw was, almost all of my clients, I had between 800 to 1,000 of them, had between 20 to 40% of their allocation towards equity outside of the US. And I saw a similar phenomena when I was there in the UK and also in Hong Kong. So international investing as a concept is not really very uncommon. Yes, it is a bit of a niche thing in India so far, but I do think that over the next 5 to 10 years time, I feel most investors will have some allocation towards international equity. So I think that is just a background. I think, but coming to, I think the opportunity, why is international investing very important? I think it's to do with, how much, what the amount of home bias that we have as investors have today. If you look at India today, India is obviously a growing economy. It's doing really well. It's one of the fastest growing countries in the world. But if you look at India from a global standpoint or a macro lens, India is only 3.5% of global GDP market share. So we are currently missing out on 96, 97% of global wealth creation opportunities that's happening outside of India. So I think that is where a lot of opportunity is. And if you look at the US markets, which is, I would say, the most obvious market to invest in, that is the opposite. It's not the world's fastest growing, but it's also it's the world's largest GDP. So I think the combination is quite unique. Just by adding, say, a diversified US fund like the S&P or the NASDAQ, you're increasing your allocation from 3.5% to close to 25, 27%. You're actually capturing a lot more of global growth in your portfolio. But, before, I think the most important bit about this presentation is what is the impact that you can have on your portfolio? What is the impact that investors today can expect in their portfolio, which is where I think international investing is extremely important. And I think the biggest opportunity today when it comes to international investing is purely diversification. I understand that a lot of investors have shown interest because of the high past returns that I've had in the last, say, 2 to 3 years time. But I think that is really not as important. We do feel that past performance is not really something that investors should look at. So I think it's important to keep the past performance aside. But I think the really important reason to why you should have this in your portfolio is because of diversification. So what does that mean? What that means is that what we've learned is that the US markets and Indian markets are not very correlated. They don't work, they don't move in the same direction. So what happens is when you're buying a US market, you're actually diversifying your portfolio a lot, and you're actually getting some downside protection in case Indian markets do not perform. So we all feel today that by diversifying your money into 4 or 5 mutual funds, you're actually diversified, but that's actually not true. What the data shows is that all Indian mutual funds tend to go in very similar direction. The correlation between an average mutual fund in India, regardless it be a large cap fund or a mid cap fund or a small cap fund, is 90% plus. So they are pretty much, they move in the same direction. Whereas when you look at international funds versus the Nifty, the correlation comes down to 25-30%. In fact, for NASDAQ, it's less than 20%. So I do feel that what that means is that as an opportunity, it's lowering your portfolio volatility dramatically and also giving you downside protection. Apart from that, I think a very important point is that today, because of the uncertainty in the investment environment, we feel that a lot of investors are today looking to diversify. They're looking to buy gold, looking to buy debt, looking to buy real estate. But the problem with those asset classes is that they are not as high return oriented than equity. Equity is obviously the most highest returning instrument over the long term. So I think with international equity, you're actually getting equity returns without, so you're actually getting diversification opportunity without letting go of returns, which I think is extremely important. So anyone looking to diversify today, should ideally look at international equity as one such avenue where they can get the benefits of low correlation, but also the same level of returns. In fact, last 10 years, international equity has done a lot better than India overall. This is the most important point. I would say this is a central point to why I think every investor should have a minimum of 15 to 20% allocation towards foreign equity through diversified mutual funds. So apart from, I think, apart from diversification opportunity, with international investing, you're actually buying two asset classes. One asset class you're buying is some of the world's best companies, best brands, global companies, global business models, all of that. But the second asset class which you're buying in the same fund is the US dollar. And we all believe, and we all believe that the US dollar today is a lot more important than the US dollar used to be, say, 10 years ago. I believe that the INR, the rupee, has depreciated by 3.5 to 5% every year over the last, I would say, 10 years. And in fact, 3.5% over the last 20 years. So, I think, and today, if you look at our consumption patterns, we are doing a lot more foreign trips. We are sending our kids to schools abroad. We are buying a lot more goods and services like the iPhone. And the reason why these things are becoming a lot more expensive is less to do with, I think, pricing of the product. It's more to do with, I think, how the dollar has behaved. In my own case, I studied in the US around 10 years ago. And when I went, the dollar used to be at 40, 45. Today it's at 75, 80. And there's a strong chance of it going to 90, 100 as well in the next 3 to 5 years time. So I think what this fund does is also protect a lot of investors from a weakening rupee, and I think that it adds to your returns as well. So for example, we have been running the NASDAQ fund for now almost 9 years. And the NASDAQ in the USD has grown around 7.5 times. So 7.5x, so 770% over the last 9 years, or last 15 years actually. But the INR version has grown almost 13 to 14 times. So the difference between 7 and 13 times is purely because of the rupee depreciation. So when you look at these two funds, you're looking at returns from three sources. One is the index performance. So the index goes up, your NAV goes up. Second is rupee. So if the rupee depreciates and your returns go up. And third is the dividend rates, which I'll be coming to, is also quite high. talking about dividend rates, so it might not be as relevant for the Nasdaq, but for the S&P, it has a dividend yield of around 2%, which I think is extremely good. It's higher than what you would get in a standard Indian index, and that's typically because if you look at more mature markets, if you look at stocks like Coca-Cola that are giving out 5 to 6% in dividend yields, I feel that dividend yields are extremely important. And if you look at dividend from a long-term landscape, the S&P 500 without dividends did around I think 11 or 12 times over the last 30 years. But if you add dividends, it's 25, 26 times. So that is the magic of dividend compounding, which is why I feel that dividend is an extremely important bit when it comes to global equity funds, because dividend rates tend to be a lot higher for global funds than for, say, emerging market funds, essentially. So lastly, also, want to talk about the quality of companies. Why is international investing so important? Today, if you look at any Indian mutual fund, I would say most of them would be having, say, an HDFC Bank or a Reliance or a TCS. But I think almost all of them would have these 2, 3, or 4 stocks. But I think it's also important to add other such companies in your portfolio as well. If you look at some of these brands on this sheet, they're all global brands. They have global business models. So I do feel that, I think you're actually buying global businesses through these 2 funds. And as you know, these are household brands. And also when you come to our own consumption, I'm sure a lot of us have spent money in using these brands somehow. So I think it's important to also evolve your portfolio with your changing consumption trends, which is becoming a lot more international going forward, which is why I think even your portfolio should also evolve in the same way. That's typically why international investing is very important. I'm talking about 3 points. One is great diversification opportunities. Number 2 is extremely important when it comes to buying the dollar as an asset class. You're buying 2 asset classes. And third, you're basically also buying high dividend yields apart from some of these really quality companies. So let's talk about the 2 funds, and then maybe we can open it up for a Q&A session. So let's talk about the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is a very interesting index. It's the biggest fund in the world. It's the largest index, I would say, in the world. It represents the entire large cap universe in the US. So you're looking at buying the top 500 companies in the US. Very similar to the Nifty 100 index in India. So I think it's a very, I would say, broad-based index. It covers 86 to 87% of the entire US market cap in this one single fund. And I think it's generally how I think the most popular index, which is a good gauge of the economy. So I think it's the best factors of how people gauge the economy. Unfortunately, recently, it's not been a good gauge of the economy because the economy is not doing well, but the index is doing well. But overall, I think over the last 10, 15 years, if someone wanted to ask how the economy is doing, they look at the S&P 500. It's also the world's largest fund. Currently it manages close to, I would say, $3.5 to $4 trillion, which is more than India's GDP in just one single fund. So very popular. And also actually the first ever passive fund launched in the world. This fund was launched in 1976. So almost half a century old, and now it's the world's largest fund. So I think not only has it sort of survived, but it's also now thrived in the same sort of time frame. So very iconic, very historic index. People like Warren Buffett, Burton Malkiel, fans of this index, and this is where they would put their money as well. So that was the S&P 500. Very good track record. Even though the fund is half a century old, at least the first S&P 500 fund was half a century old. The track record of this fund goes down to almost 1920s. So very old fund. You can see performance of it for 70, 80 years. And I think it's a very simple fund to understand. When it comes to, I think one of the big, I would say, advantages of the S&P 500 is how diversified it is. The S&P 500 is actually one of the most diversified indexes out there. It is well diversified across different industries over the last 10 years. And even though, yes, information technology has picked up a lot post-COVID, I would say if you see the S&P 500 over, say, a 10-year period or a 20-year period, it's actually a fairly diversified index, which I think is great. And also, I think even if you look at the top 10 stocks, they're pretty much only a quarter of the index, which I think is pretty good, talking about the size of the entire index. So I think very diversified, very broad-based, and I would say number of companies is also a lot higher, which is why I think it's a great index. Lastly, even though this index is listed in the US, so you're looking at buying American companies, what we've seen is that this is actually a global index. If you see the quality of companies, they all have global business models. So you're looking at 40%, 40 to 45% of the entire S&P 500 universe having revenue coming from outside of the US. So we call it the world's large cap index, but essentially you're buying an exposure to global businesses. In fact, what we've seen is that a lot of the revenue for the S&P 500 is actually growing at a much faster rate in, say, emerging markets such as India and Brazil and I think Southeast Asia than the US businesses. So I do feel that going forward, investors can expect a much higher growth coming from their international operations. So that was the S&P 500, very simple, very, I would say broad-based, very, I would say a very easy fund. The next is the NASDAQ index, which is a lot more popular today. It's a very, I would say the second most, I would say largest or most popular index that is in the US. The reason why the NASDAQ is a lot more popular is because it has a much higher allocation towards technology and telecommunications. Two of the sectors that are doing really well in the last 10 years. So in terms of performance, the NASDAQ has done really well. I think it's probably the top performing index in the world. And it's also a biggest fund. So we had a lot of success in this fund. But basically what the NASDAQ is it's not really a top 100 companies. It's the largest non-financial companies that are listed on the NASDAQ exchange. So it's basically more futuristic in terms of the businesses that the NASDAQ holds. I think it's much higher allocation towards technology, telecommunications, software, consumer, healthcare. I think the big thing about the NASDAQ is that it has zero allocation towards financial services, energy, utilities, and materials. So I think a lot of the laggards or the slow moving industries are not really there in the NASDAQ, which is why it's grown at such a high rate over the last 10 years. It's also not as diversified or than the S&P index. And the top 10 stocks are about 50 to 55% of the index. And also, as I said, technology and communication services combined would be around 70, maybe 65, 70% of the index. So I do think that, yes, it's a slightly more tilt towards technology and technology, communication, and consumer, whereas I think say S&P is a lot more diversified across all sectors. I think that's one of the differences between both the indexes. In terms of valuations, yes, I think this is a very important point. Yes, the valuations are quite heightened at this point of time. So investors looking to buy these indexes, I would say should keep that in mind. We are as an AMC recommending investors to do an SIP-led approach because of maybe it might not be the best thing to go all in right now. Maybe an SIP make more sense. So I think that's where we are in terms of valuations. But I think investors should also understand that valuations are not really that important, especially for these US indices, because earnings has been quite great. So just imagine, the NASDAQ has grown 7.5 times in the US over the last 10 years, but their P graph is flat. So what that means is a lot of the appreciation that you see in these indexes is only because of earnings, not because of the P ratio expanding or PB ratio expanding. So what we've learned is that these businesses are cash flow machines. They are very high profits. In fact, most of them don't really know what to do with so much money that they keep printing on a monthly basis. So I think it's important to understand that yes, valuations are heightened, but even earnings have been quite great for at least the top 30, 40 companies for both indexes. So historical performance, what I would say is, yes, historical performance is really good, almost too good, but I would not really, focus too much on performance. The NASDAQ has done, I think, close to 26% CAGR, which I think is huge, and I would lower expectations for investors going forward. So I think the ability to be able to maintain this sort of performance is I would say it would be irrational to expect the same performance. So I would ask investors to have the same level of performance of what they would expect in Indian equities. Obviously, for India, last 10 years has not been the great. India has done around 8.5%, whereas S&P has done 20% and Nasdaq has done 26, 27%. So I think overall, yes, yes, I mean, it shows that there is a capacity for these indexes to do really well. But I think going forward, I wouldn't expect these sort of returns happening. I think the true reason to why you should buy these funds is to do with diversification, low correlation, buying the dollar, dividend yields. Those are really the best reasons to why you should buy this and not really returns. So that's, I think, pretty much most of the things I want to talk about. Let's just quickly, I just wanted to talk about the differences between these two funds. I spoke about it like maybe not in a big way, but ideally you're looking at S&P, which is a more broad market index, has 500 companies, captures 83% of the entire US market cap. And, it's more diversified. It has all 11 sectors in it. Whereas Nasdaq is more technology heavy. It covers less of the US, and also it does not have 4 or 5 sectors in them. And I think even stock concentration is slightly on the higher side. So I think that's pretty much the differences between these two funds. I would say if investors are looking to choose between these two funds, I would say a good strategy would be to do 50-50 between Nasdaq and S&P. But it also depends on your risk profile. So if you can't take that much volatility, then I would say the S&P is a much simpler, lot more diversified, low risk sort of equity index. But if someone really has a strong call on the technology index or technology stocks going up even higher or next 10 years, then obviously the Nasdaq is a slightly better bet in that regard. So that's pretty much how I would stock up these indexes. I think we can open it up for questions now. Thank you.
Thank you for this insightful presentation, Mr. Oswal. We now start with the panel discussion with our speaker and our moderator. I hand it over to Mr. Imran.
Hi Pratik, it was a very nice presentation.
Thank you, Imran.
Now we are starting with the question answer session. Generally, the first question arises is that we have seen recently the strong rally across the globe in the equity market, where the market is almost came over to there where it was earlier before the COVID scenario. So what is your view on global economy given the rally, which has fueled across the globe because of the liquidity situation?
Yeah, so I agree with that. There's been an unexpected rally, I think, globally in India as well as in the US. And I think it would be attributed to 3 things. One is the heavy liquidity spend that's happening by the US government. So you have close to 4 or 5, I think $4 to $4.5 trillion already being sort of pushed into the system. And because the interest rates are at zero, a lot of this money ends up coming to the stock market, which is why I think, a lot of companies have also levered, but also I think, it's made valuations, or the run up has happened in a much faster way. Apart from that, also, I think, recovery has been better than what people expected in March. So if you look at the numbers, if you look at earnings of companies, if you look at the sales, the retail sales of a lot of these companies that are going, that are out there, it's better than what people expected. And third is also the vaccination trials are also in a very good way. So people are expecting a vaccine to be in order maybe beginning of next year. So I think if you combine all of 3, that's why the US markets have run up quite a bit over the last at least 3 to 4 months time. However, I think there is still a lot of uncertainty in the economy. There is a lot of pain in the system, but also I think people have really adapted really well to the COVID crisis. I think if you look at earnings, I would say 80 to 90% of the companies in the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq have actually posted better than expected earnings. So I think companies have adapted well. But yes, I think the bigger crisis happening is more on the healthcare and unemployment side. So and most of the focus is happening on unemployment and healthcare, and anything that goes even worse from where they are right now will affect the stock market in some way.
So do you think so that in coming time period, will this scenario will be retained, or will this rally will be further fueled, or a major correction is on card, something like that?
Honestly, honestly, I don't know. I don't think anyone can predict the future. But I think you can say that valuations are heightened. So maybe a more prudent strategy would be to do an SIP-led approach to international investing. I do feel that, um, in fact, the recovery has been better than the recoveries in India. But I think the more important bit about whatever I've spoken is to have an allocation, not to really take a call on where the markets will go. I do believe that asset allocation is a great strategy, because by splitting your assets in multiple asset classes, you don't really need to time the markets. Essentially, you're basically splitting your money in four or five different directions, because you don't know what will do well at what time. So I think that is what the approach that I would really recommend to investors. Have a 10 to 15% or maybe 20% allocation, but make sure you get there in the next, say, 12 to 18 months time. And I think the SIP approach seems more prudent at this point of time, because yes, valuations are slightly higher and on the higher side, and yes, also I think the economy is still under a lot of stress.
What do you think so regarding what percentage of investment one should do by using your fund? If a local investor, hypothetically, what percentage of fund you should allocate to the global investment?
Yeah. So we have been preaching 10 to 15% on a minimum basis towards international funds. I think that is something that every investor should have, because anything less than that, if you're looking at, say, a 3% or a 4% allocation, then it just becomes some other fund in a portfolio. It doesn't really matter. But if you want to really take the advantage of diversification, where it sort of percolates to the entire portfolio, then it needs to be a significant investment. So I think 10 to 15% minimum is what at least we would recommend to start off with. But I think that's quite prudent, and that will make sure that at a portfolio level, you're actually quite well diversified.
Now, as you have said that comparative to lump sum, SIP will be a better option. So hypothetically assume that an investor decide to invest into your fund. Where will you give more focus, rather than on Nasdaq 100 or S&P 500? Comparatively, which one will be better? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, both are very different. Both are, I would say, very different funds. I think it's apples and oranges. I wouldn't know which one is better or worse, because it depends on the investor. I think if a person really cannot decide as to which one they can choose, can do a 50-50 and be done with it. You don't have to think twice. But obviously, a lot depends on your risk profile. So if you're someone who cannot really take as much volatility, so Nasdaq has had high returns because it has a higher allocation towards technology, but also has a lot more volatile as an index. So I think people are looking to have a more simpler, less volatile sort of experience. Then the S&P is a great fund. It's very simple. It's done pretty well. It survived half a century. But obviously, if someone wants to take a call on the technology industry, on healthcare, consumer services, then the Nasdaq is a slightly better bet. So I think it depends on I think what investors' risk profile and what their bet is. We believe that technology is going to play as big a role in the future than it has in the past. So I think yes, it's not like Nasdaq is a bad investment, but I think it really depends on the risk profile and what your conviction on the technology sector is. I think depending on that, you can choose the S&P or the Nasdaq fund. But I think overall, the important point I didn't really cover in the presentation is the importance of low cost when it comes to investing. So both these funds are index funds or passive funds, and at least maybe in India, both are doing well, active and passive. But when it comes to more mature markets such as the US, we've seen that passive funds tend to be a lot cheaper, so your saving costs tend to be a lot more effective, because I think as of last month, 91% of all funds were underperforming the S&P 500. So I think it's a lot simpler option. You don't have to go out there and find a manager and all that. It's much simpler option. It's easier, it's low cost, and it's very effective. So I think when it comes to global investing, we recommend, at least, obviously I'm biased, but I think most people out there would recommend doing a simple index fund.
Fair enough, Pratik. So from your opinion, if a person having higher risk appetite, you should go for Nasdaq 100.
Yes.
First, having a fair risk appetite should go for S&P 500 fund.
Yeah.
Okay, so that point is very much clear. Now coming down to another question is that apart from US, if somebody want to diversify into other markets like Europe, China, or something like that, do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, I totally recommend it. So I think US is not really the only market in the world. Yes, it's 50 to 55% of the entire listed market cap in the world. And yes, the US is maybe the first obvious market because it's the only market where you can find truly global companies. As I said, 40% of even for both Nasdaq and S&P, their revenue comes from operations outside the US. So they're all pretty globally diversified indexes. But I would recommend investors to also look at emerging markets like China, Brazil, Taiwan, or look at more sort of other developed markets like Japan and Europe. I think the only issue is that these markets haven't really done well over the last 10 years. I think the last 10 years has only been a US story, and even if you see Europe and Japan, they haven't really delivered in terms of performance, and nor has China or India. Both have been quite lackluster when it comes to performance. So I think, yes, even though the US has done well, I would recommend investors to do more than just US, make sure you have some allocation towards, say, developed and emerging markets, because then you're really covering all bases.
I think we have seen that in last 6 months, Nasdaq has done phenomenally very well. And it has made almost a new all-time high comparative to rest of the pack of the entire indexes available. What is your outlook that whether for the next 5 years, will this rally is going to further run, or what could be the possible scenario specifically for technology-oriented stocks?
Yeah. So we believe that technology is going to play as big a role in the future than it has in the past. In fact, I think in 5 or maybe 10 years, the whole world will have to become a technology company. So I think the sectors will probably merge. I think today no one knows if Jio is a tech company or an oil and gas company or a retail play. I think sectors will merge. So I think sector funds may not be as relevant 5 or 10 years from now, because everything will become tech and conglomerates and all of that. So I do think that Nasdaq is one index, one exchange that really benefits from this, because if you see all the IPOs that are coming up in the tech sector in the next 3 months, all of them are going to be listed in the Nasdaq. If you look at Palantir, if you look at I think Airbnb is also getting listed. I think Snowflake is also getting listed. All of them will be listed in the Nasdaq. So any company that is innovative in any sense is going to be looking at the Nasdaq exchange. And I think innovation is what really what you can buy in the Nasdaq exchange. So I think, yes, if you're betting on innovation, if you're betting on new business models, on technology, then Nasdaq is probably one of the best exchanges out there. And also, I think it's not only technology. I think you're still getting, I think around 20% of the index is actually consumer durables, consumer discretionary. You have around 7-8% of healthcare. So I think overall, it's not as tech heavy as what most people feel. In fact, if you look at the COVID time, last 3 or 4 months time, if you look at the Nasdaq index, technology has actually gone down in terms of its prominence. I think the weightage of technology in Nasdaq index actually is fallen compared to consumer discretionary and healthcare. So actually, it's the consumer plays which have actually been the ones who have literally, I think by losing less, you're actually getting a lot more prominence. So I think it's a fairly diversified, but also I think has a large allocation towards I think more innovative companies. So I think overall, yes, if you look at next 5 years, I think it'll do really well, because it stands for a lot of innovative companies, which I think will do well.
Pratik, I want to get your outlook regarding the choice given to the investor, that whether he should go for an ETF or whether he should go for an multi-asset or a dynamic fund. Which would you suggest? Which would be better comparatively?
You mean when it comes to international?
Yeah, when it comes to international.
Yeah, so I think international is, I think when you're looking at multi-asset fund, which has an international component, the only issue with multi-asset funds is that the international tends to be a very small proportion of the overall fund. So if you are putting, say, maybe 10% or 20% of your capital in a multi-asset fund, of that, maybe 10 or 20% will be in international equity, which I think comes down to 1 or 2%, which doesn't really give you diversification, as I said. I mean, in my opinion, it should be a minimum of 10 to 15% of your overall equity portfolio. I think for that, you might have to go directly in buying a pure international fund, or going towards buying a fund that is, has a lot more allocation towards international stocks. So I believe multi-asset funds may not cut it if you're looking at a good size allocation towards international funds. And when it comes to ETF versus, I think fund of funds, so we are, I think ETFs are phenomenal products. But only issue is that currently in India, ETFs don't have very high liquidity. So investors who are buying ETFs tend to pay slightly higher when they're buying, and they sell it at a slightly lower amount. So I think investors who are looking to buy an ETF should also look at the differences between price and NAV, and make sure that the price should be very close to where it should be. And if investors don't want to take the hassle of that, they can just buy the fund of funds, where you're pretty much getting really good sort of prices for what you're paying for. So I think it depends on what the investor prefers. If the investor has a demat account, go out there and buy it, then the ETF might be better. But just make sure you just check the prices before you buy. Whereas if you just want convenience, then the fund of funds is maybe slightly more convenient.
I think there is one question from a participant. He is asking that what is the minimum amount required to invest into your fund?
It's 500 rupees. So we've kept it pretty low. So I think the minimum is 500 rupees per transaction. For the ETF, I think the price of the ETF is around 800 to 900 rupees. So we'll probably bring that down by one fifth, maybe next few months. But yes, it's for our mutual fund, it's around 500.
Okay, and can you a little bit explain what is the modus operandi, how we can invest into your funds?
Yes, yeah. So for the NASDAQ fund, we have two choices. We have the ETF, which is listed on the exchange. So you can buy it whenever the markets are open on the exchange. Very simple, which was launched 9 years ago. So it's been running for very long, and we have very low tracking error as well. So that's good. But if you're looking at, if you're not looking at something which we're looking at mutual funds only, then we have the fund of funds, where the NASDAQ fund of fund, where you can buy it from a website or from any sort of distributor out there. We also have the S&P 500 index fund. So that's a pure index fund, very similar to a Nifty 50 index fund, where we are going out there and buying the stocks in the US on a daily basis. So that is also like a mutual fund. So you can buy it from any distributor out there. So that's pretty much the three options that we have currently. So, yeah, and just to clarify, I haven't spoken about our funds so far. These funds, because they're international equity funds, as per regulation, they are not treated as equity funds; they're treated as debt funds. So the taxation for all international funds, and this is as per income tax law and also SEBI rules, is debt taxation. So investors who are investing in this ideally should not be looking at it from a short-term perspective. But if you look at it from a 3 years plus, then you can get benefits of indexation, 20% indexation, where your tax can come down dramatically over time. But I think that is something which investors should know. I think the taxation is debt type. But obviously, if you look at it from a long-term perspective, I don't think it's taxation may be relevant, because you can get benefits of indexation.
And Pratik, what is the tracking error regarding your fund?
So the NASDAQ fund has a tracking error. So tracking error is I would say, it's a misunderstood sort of a term. It's not the difference between the index versus the underlying versus the fund. The tracking error is a standard deviation of the difference between the two returns on a daily basis. That's how it's calculated. So tracking error for the NASDAQ would be around 0.2 to 0.3% every year for the last 3 years. So we've been managing very efficiently. I think if you look at the difference between the fund and the index, it'd be around maybe 1% to 1.1, 1.2% would be the difference between the two funds, if you look at it from a very long-term perspective. The S&P fund is very young. It's only been 3 months. So we won't be, I think it's relatively new, and I think it takes some time for the funds to stabilize. But so far, I think the S&P fund also has not that much tracking error, and we've already scaled up our fund to, I think, almost 450 crores. So I think the tracking error becomes less of a problem the bigger your fund is.
Okay, and regarding, do you think so that in your fund any cross-currency risk or something like is involved?
Yes, yeah. So, buying international funds, you're buying two sorts of risks. One is equity risk, and the other one is currency risk. So we don't hedge currency; we keep it as it is. So far it has worked out well for investors, and we do think that going forward as well, it's also going to help investors because I think India is a much more higher inflationary economy, a higher growth economy. We have higher interest rates, and essentially. If you look at just economics 101, the country with a higher inflation rate tends to depreciate the currency. So I think so far, yes, any devaluation in the currency will add to your returns. But yes, if so, for example, when we launched our S&P fund, we launched it when the dollar was at 76, and now the dollar is back to 73. So I think that has sort of negatively impacted the returns. But obviously, the index has also done 15-20%. So you won't really see the difference, but maybe in a bad market, you might see differences which are quite high. So for example, in 2011, when we launched our Nasdaq fund, I think the Nasdaq was completely flat, but the rupee depreciated by around 15%. So the Indian investors were up 15%. So I think people who are investing in international funds should ideally also think of it as investing in the currency, because you are buying 100% dollar denominated fund. So your returns will be a fraction of what you make in the index versus what you could make if the rupee falls down.
I think another question which is coming is that, let us say hypothetically two investors are there. Both have decided to invest into Nasdaq 100 and S&P 500. So they are now doing the SIP. In your opinion, what could be the optimum time frame so he could do that he can get an maximum return type of thing or an optimum return type of thing? Let us say hypothetically 3 years, 5 years, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there is no optimum time. I think power of compounding says that the longer you hold your money, the better it is. So if you hold it for, I mean, Warren Buffett, I think it took him 50 years to get to $1 billion and 20 years to get from 1 billion to 100 billion. So I think the longer you hold them, the more effective investing tends to be. So have faith in compounding. Don't looking at price performance. And so I think the longer you hold them, the better it is. It also depends on your goals. So if you're looking at maybe a retirement, I think that also I think matters a lot. So I think depending on goal, but I would say that minimum of 3 to 5 years is something that every equity investor should look at. Ideally, 3 to 5 years is not really long enough to reap the rewards of compounding. Compounding, the money you invest today starts compounding, doubling, tripling, quadrupling every year, 10, 15 years from now. So I think longer the better, but yes, 3 to 5 years is a minimum that I would recommend investing in this in these two funds.
Okay, for someone who is specifically focusing for his child's education, who is as of now at 3 or 5 years age, so will 15, 20 years will be what do you think so? Will be a good time?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at sending your kid to a school outside of India, then we would recommend putting, I would say, most of their equity money in the same currency, because I think so we have 60-70% of that corpus that you save in a foreign denominated fund like the S&P or Nasdaq, whatever it is. So I do think that when it comes, if you're saving for goals that are in a different currency, then it's important to save in those specific products. So if you're saving for, say, I don't know, foreign vacation, or if you're saving for maybe shopping abroad, whatever it is, which is happening in a different currency, I think we would recommend having those goals saved in that currency. So I think an S&P or a Nasdaq makes a lot more sense for those type of goals.
So Prateek, it was a fair amount of question answer sessions with you. Now I'm handing towards to Forum in case if she has got any further questions. Forum, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this fruitful discussion. We start with the question answer session. If our guests have any question, you all can raise your hands and ask your questions directly to our speakers. And if you all have any further questions, can put in the chat room also. So the first question coming in, sir, is while investing globally, an investor always carrying high risk of currency fluctuation and interest rate differential, how you think these two risks can be managed?
Yeah. So I think, yes. So, I mean, so as I said, these two funds or any funds that is sending your money abroad and buying foreign security has two risks. One is the equity risk, and the other one is currency risk. What I would do is not really worry about it, So I think the whole point about diversification or the whole point about asset allocation is to not have a view on things. I think if if the Indian currency appreciates, then yes, you are wealthier. Things abroad get much cheaper for you. So in a way, I mean, I'm guessing most of your portfolio is in Indian equities. So I do think that your spending power increases, but obviously, if the rupee does depreciate, which I think there's a much larger likelihood for it to happen over the next 3 to 5 years' time, then obviously it's good that you have these funds in your portfolio to protect your wealth and all of that. So I think what I would say is that not to worry about these risks. I would say ultimately you're buying good businesses, and that's what matters. And I think and buying an index is great because the index evolves every time. So the index doesn't really care about if it's a value or a growth or if it's Apple or it's Google. If Apple doesn't perform tomorrow, it'll be kicked out of the index like this. The index used to be like in India, the Nifty used to, I think, oil and gas and industrials 15 years ago. Today it's financial services. Tomorrow it might be something else. You never know. So I think buying an index fund is great because for 10, 15, 20 years, and it will keep on evolving and keep on changing. So I think what I would say is do it for diversification and not really have a view on things because no one really knows how these things pan out.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, would this negate the diversification benefit arising from geographic diversification?
What will negate?
The same question that we asked earlier. I'll just repeat the question. In the last few months from the onset of the pandemic, we've seen a stronger line of positive correlation between Indian and global markets. Can we expect this to continue for the next few years?
Yeah, so correlation is a very funny thing. If you look at correlation between the markets, correlation is pretty much a lot higher than what I showed in my presentation. So if you look at the correlation between Nifty and the S&P, it's about 50%. But you're actually buying two things. You're buying S&P, but you're also buying the dollar. So and the correlation between the Nifty and the dollar USD, so the INR USD, the exchange rate and Nifty is actually negative 30%. If you add those two, it's around 20%. So I think even though yes, the markets have gone in a very similar direction, if you've seen the rupee is actually appreciated over that much time. So I think and if you look at it from a 10-year or a 15-year landscape, it's actually very different. So I think you have to see correlations from both angles, the currency as well as the index. Yes, I agree. The indexes tend to be a little bit more correlated than I would say what you see on paper. But if you add the currency aspect, then you'll have very different numbers.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is whether the fund of funds serve better for the NRIs rather than compared to a resident Indian, seeing the extent of exposure for currency.
Yeah, I think it depends on where your money is. So if you're NRI and if your money is in India, then I would say, you could use any international, any mutual funds in India to have any exposure towards companies abroad. I think every resident or at least there's an LRS. If you have to send money abroad, there is a cap of 250K, which obviously I think it's good. But if you wanted to say deploy more, then I think Indian mutual funds can do that. Also, I think LRS is slightly on the expensive side today. Hopefully, get cheaper over time. But I think overall, it depends on where your money is. If your money is already in the US, then I wouldn't recommend investing in these funds because you're basically converting USD into INR and again to USD, where it might not be the most efficient. Plus, I think if you buy funds directly in the US, they're also a lot cheaper. So I think overall, it depends on where the money is, and depending on that, I think you should decide whether you should invest directly through mutual funds in India or directly in the US.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, market is assuming NASDAQ as tech who drives the world. Will it be double in the next 2-3 years?
No one knows, honestly. I don't know. I don't think you should if you should not invest if you have that expectation. I would say it's run up a lot, so don't expect it to. I would say, I keep telling investors, please lower your expectations. In fact, we've sent out emailers to all our clients saying, please don't buy it because of high past return. You will be disappointed. I mean, and if you have so high expectations, and even I as an AMC guy will lose a lot of customers. So I think, have low expectations, don't expect it to double and triple. I would say 10 to 15% is something that you should, is prudent to expect over the next 3 to 5 years time. And that's what you should be looking at. And it's not really a tech company. In fact, it's not really tech heavy. Yes, the top 10 stocks tend to be tech heavy, but I think you're looking at only 50% of the index that's technology. 50% is a combination of healthcare, telecom, everything else. So it's actually a lot more diversified than what most people feel. But yes, I think the driving factor for at least the last 10 years has been tech.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, will there be opportunities to add larger sums in the US market given the upcoming elections there?
Yeah, so elections is, we did the study of elections, and I was there when Trump was elected. Not really something what most people wanted, but didn't really affect the markets. Also there when Obama was elected. We study all the elections in the last 100 years. And what we've seen is that on an average election year, the index makes around 7% in returns. So it's always positive. What we've seen is also in a non-election year, the index makes 7%. So what that means is that there's not really any impact of elections on the stock market. I think the US is a very hardcore capitalistic nation. So I don't think economics and stock market really go together. So I think, yes, investors can expect heightened volatility before the elections. It's coming in November, but don't really base your decisions on who wins, who loses. I think it's not really, it is a big event, but for a long-term investor, it's not really something that you should be looking at.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question coming from our guest is there a provision to invest in the IPO there?
In the IPO, so you can invest in IPOs if you go directly. I'm not sure, maybe not through the funds at least we have, the two funds that we have, but yeah, if you go directly, then there should be opportunities for you to invest in IPOs there. So you have to set up a foreign brokerage account and send money abroad and all of that. But yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, please throw some light on the taxation aspect for an investor for the fund.
So taxation is very important. Even though as an asset class it's equity, as per income tax lens, it's actually a debt fund. So you will be taxed like a debt fund. So I think you'll have slab around 30% for the first 3 years, and then that goes down to say 20% plus indexation. So what indexation means is basically you can adjust your purchase price by inflation. So if you wait for a very long time, say 3-5 years, then I think your tax rates between equity and debt are pretty much very similar. But obviously, anyone who's taking a short-term bet should keep in mind that tax rates are relatively high. So which is also why I think I wouldn't recommend taking a short-term bet because even tax rates are quite high. So, but in a sense, these instruments are taxed as debt.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, international ETFs, especially on Indian exchanges, have had issues with liquidity in trade. Does MOSL also provide marketing, making, hence reduce the liquidity in the ETF?
Yeah, so so we have commercial arrangements with a couple of market makers. So we have 3 ETFs, and in fact, people who don't want to go through the ETF to buy our international funds can just buy the fund of funds, where they can go direct to the AMC and we make sure you get a good price. So that was a solution to the low liquidity. But I think last 6 months, liquidity has increased quite a bit for ETFs in India. I think the spreads have come down, especially for a Nasdaq fund, because now it's a large fund. I think it's close to 1,700 crore. So I think it's a large fund. There's a lot of liquidity that we have on a daily basis, lots of buyers and sellers. But yes, I think you still never know. You might just have some crazy buyer, crazy seller who might go out there and just buy and sell. So I think investors should ideally, as I said, go to our website if you're buying the ETF and see and so we publish the NAV data and the INAV every 15 minutes. So maybe you can look at that price and make sure that your price is pretty much close to that. If you don't want that hassle, then there is a fund of funds, which also gives you the same experience in terms of returns.
Thank you, sir. Next question is, do we see Europe or Japan or China, which will be the better run aspects over Nasdaq?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's hard to say, I think, so Europe has, I would say, I think emerging markets are probably better placed than developed markets ex-US over the next 10 years. So Europe has had huge, I would say, sovereign problems. And I think even growth out there has slowed down dramatically. There's not a lot of innovation happening there. A lot of in the US companies have really populated deeply into these markets because they tend to be a lot more aggressive. So I think, yes, if you're looking at a market outside of the US, which I really recommend, I think emerging markets might be a better bet. So if you look at China, Taiwan, Brazil, Indonesia, are the markets where there is a lot of fundamental, I would say, good growth on the ground. And so I think those are markets where I would say there'll be a lot more activity, a lot more wealth creation opportunities than say, I think maybe Europe and Japan, where there not seems to be, I think at least last 10 years haven't been any game changing when it comes to anything different to what's happening there.
Thank you so much, sir. The last question for the evening is, are you expecting correction in the market? If yes, how much?
I have, so I've said this before, I think no one can predict. And I believe that anyone who says he can predict it should not be trusted. So I think that's where I end. So I would say, which is why I said, do an SIP. I do agree. A lot of uncertainty, valuations are high. So if people are on the risk averse side, then do an SIP, but don't try to time the markets. I think we've learned that, at least I've seen, and I have data to prove it also, that people who wait for corrections end up losing a lot more money. And in fact, people who get timing right end up losing and making less money than people who are just invested throughout. So I think just do an SIP strategy, make sure you are very diligent about it, regardless of where the markets are, and over the long term, you'll see the effectiveness.
Thank you so much, sir. We've just got a one last minute question.
Sure.
Does Motilal have any products for Greater China?
We don't have any products for China. We're working on it. So we're working on China, not China, but we're looking at emerging markets, I think, as a product. So yeah, hopefully sometime this year, we'll be able to provide that to investors.
Thank you so much, sir. We've received an overwhelming response and we've tried as much as possible to cater to the questions given to us. If you have any further questions, kindly send us a mail at support@gplcapital.com and we'll certainly get back to you. I now hand it over to Sharmila.
We thank our speakers and moderator for joining us today. A big thank you to Mr. Pamit Singh, Area Head, Mr. Titu Nahak, Relationship Manager at MOSL MF for organizing this webinar today. Maybe have you say something, Mr. Pamit?
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Rupesh. Thank you, Mr. Vora from GPL, and thank you, Prateek, for such a wonderful, insightful presentation. And thank you, everyone for joining us. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, sir. For all the audience who have joined us, thank you so much. We really do hope that we have clarified your doubts. Hope you enjoyed the session. If you like our episode, please put on your cameras and have thumbs up so that we can capture you. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay updated with our next event. We at GPL will come up with more sessions related to different subjects. Have a good day. Stay safe. Thank you.